The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Okay, so on yesterday's podcast, I said that I called this gambling week, and it was a massive lie. But on today's podcast, I can say I called it gambling week, and I think I'm finally going to be telling you the truth. And I feel a lot better about myself because of that. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. Dan Besbris, Neil Rochlani. We are two degenerate peas in a pod. Neil, I'm going to start the podcast not by asking how you are today, but by asking how excited were you when the season win totals came out? On a scale from 1 to 10.5.
10. 10 only because I was so busy filling up hoop ball leagues that I needed time. It took away from that. But other than that, no, I was really excited to see it. I haven't bet a lot of win totals before because I don't like having money like locked up for that long. So normally I don't bet like these long-term bets. But now that I'm all in the hoop ball, I'm going to bet every angle I can. So happy to see that win totals were out. We have something to talk about with the NBA besides some nonsense in the background. And I'm going to do my best to present my cases today for a few overs. So we'll see how that goes.
It's a serious nonsense time of year, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, which is kind of nice because it's going to ramp up pretty quickly. So I'm glad to have a little respite.
Yeah, I guess that's true. You give the brain a little time off. That's fine. Before we get into the win total stuff, I want to do, as I've been doing on a lot of podcasts, but it's fun to do it with you because I threw you just headlong, like soaked in lighter fluid into the fire. That is the listener and reader leagues. Last season, I tried to handle all of the, I guess what you call like recruitment and placement and opening leagues and trying to figure out all the settings, and it was too much. I tried to do all of it, and it was too much. And I know that there were some problems with the leagues last year. Overall, they ran relatively smoothly, but it could have been a better experience, I think, for people joining up the Hoop Ball leagues. And luckily this year, Neil, the gentleman whose voice you will once again hear in a moment, was foolish enough to volunteer to help me out on this regard. And now you've had to deal with, like, I think we're probably around 100 people that have joined up already on August 9th. It'll be by the time this podcast airs. First and foremost, before we tell people how they can join if they haven't already, how you doing? You hanging in there okay?
Oh, yeah, Dan. This is a labor of love. I'm doing just fine.
Okay, good.
It isn't too bad, but I appreciate the support. I was glad to take it. Well, I wouldn't say that. I was happy to be the asked me to help out. I said sure, and it hasn't been that bad. I'm really actually excited to see some people are interested, and I can do something and get them to have a little fantasy fun in their life as the fall comes around.
Yeah, I mean, these leagues turn out to be a lot of fun. We have both head-to-head and roto leagues. We have cash and free format. So if you're out there and you want to join one of these things, hop on in. It's a couple easy ways to do so. You can join by posting in the forums. You go to hoop-ball.com, click on the forums tab, and go to the Hoop Ball Leagues page. You just post your interest there, and Neil will get in touch with you. Or you can tweet at us, at Dan Besbris and at Ball with Neil. We'll get you hooked up in whatever type of league you want to join. Am I missing anything? Is that's basically what people need to know, right?
Yeah, that's it to join. I mean, just go over a little bit of the specification. It's a 9-cat league. Like you said, it's either head-to-head or roto. The free one is obviously free, and then the cash one is $50. So, and they're going to be about 12 teams, right? I know the head-to-heads are set up as 12, roto, a little more flexible, but that's what we're aiming for. I think that's it. Like I will say though, I try to get to it once a night. So if you like tweet at me in the morning, it might take me like 10 hours to get back to you, but I will get back to you.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. And yes, you're right. Roto leagues right now are set at 12. If there's sort of like a weird mishmash number at the end of the whole process, we'll just let that roll. For now, though, if we fill up 12, we'll just open up a new one. And like Neil said, free or $50. It's pretty easy, relatively light money either way. But we've got those of you who don't want to put anything on the line. That's fine. Just pride. And those that were looking to win a couple of bucks, you can do that as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have people actually paying closer attention, I think, monitoring these things. I was able to check last year to see how often people logged into the league. I know I mentioned this on a pod last week or the week before, and I mean, people were in it. Even in the free ones, people were logging in 150, 200 times a season. So people take this very seriously. These are the best of the best, the Hoopball listeners, the Hoopball readers, and Hoopball pros also kind of sprinkled around them, Neil, such as yourself, and you'll be defending a title. So, maybe someone can get in there and knock you off your pedestal a little bit, huh?
Please come at me. That's what I'll say. And please don't make me do a report on how many times every person is logged in. That might be a little overwhelming.
No, I happen to notice those things when you're sending out league emails. It'll show you activity and stuff like that. It's just interesting things to know. We also have a Dynasty League. By the way, I'll mention that. Adrian Benjamins, one of the other hosts here on Fantasy NBA Today, is commissioning that. It is full. But if you'd like to get on the waiting list, you can do that in the forums as well. You just go into the Hoopball Dynasty page instead of the traditional Hoopball leagues and post in there. Let's talk sports betting. Neil, you've got a few key overs you mentioned, just key bets that you liked. As I mentioned on yesterday's podcast, for those that didn't tune in, I talked about the fact that, for me, time has been a little bit shorter this week than I expected. Just different things have cropped up. It's cost me the opportunity to spend the 6 to 10 hours on this stuff that I really want to. And so I frankly, I don't want to put out bad information. So, because I'm not going through all of my own stuff, I thought it might be kind of fun to force you into basically the Fantasy NBA Today PhD program, where Neil has been preparing his thesis, and he's going to come before the panel, which is sadly just me because I have no friends, and I'm going to yell at you. And basically, I'm going to tell the listeners right now before we start that I don't know what you're about to tell me. We have not discussed this beforehand, but I'd be willing to wager, pun intended, that you and I probably agree on a lot of stuff. But I'm going to be taking the counterpoint side to everything Neil says, regardless of how I actually feel about a particular wager, just to put it through the ringer. Okay, Neil, now you know that. I don't hate you. The listeners know I don't hate Neil. I'm just going to make your life miserable for the next 20 minutes. How does that sound?
It's same as it ever was. No, I'm happy to go through this. No, I want to be pushed back because some of these seem, I don't want to say obvious, but that's a dumb word. What I'll say is I was surprised by the number. That's all.
Well, nothing is a sure thing, but sometimes, Neil, we do have to trust our gut. It's over many years of sports betting, I've learned that sometimes you can kind of outthink yourself, and that may happen on some of these things, but let's start kind of prying it open a little bit. I think we're going to go through 4 today. We're going to try to spend a decent amount of time on each of them. If we happen to go extra fast, maybe we'll slip in a 5th one. If we want to spend a little more time on one, maybe we'll do 3 instead of 4. But these are some of Neil's most interesting season win totals looks. And this is also angry Dr. Besbris here on this side of the pod, making you miserable. Let's begin. Neil, what do you got first?
All right, I want to start in my hometown of Chicago. Last year, they won 27 games. The over-under is 27.5. I am going over. All right, so, I listened to your podcast on how you break these down. At least I got your primer on where you start, at least, in breaking these down. Mm-hmm. When I look at Chicago, I think, one, they're in a situation where they need to win now. At least the coach does. And he's got some players around him now that can score and play the offense that he wants, with Levine coming in. I'm assuming he's healthy coming in. And then I'm assuming Parker's going to be able to play the whole season as well. We get Chris Dunn for the entire season. I know defensively they're going to be a train wreck, but I think you mentioned on the show the other day that it's hard not to get into the low 20s. And I just think Chicago is going to be better than last year. So with that, I'm going with the over.
Oh man, I forgot I was actually just going to argue with you. I almost biffed it on the very first thing I was going to say and said, "You know what? I actually kind of agree." All right, that's right. I forgot. I need to ready myself to take the opposition side. Okay, so here's Neil, I understand where you're coming from on these arguments, but a lot of Chicago's best success last season came when Nico Mirotic was a feature part of their offense. How do you see them making up for his departure, Because after he left, they went back to being a really, really bad team.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to argue that Mirotic didn't help their wins last year, and things looked a little bleak afterwards. I do think they were kind of in tank mode, though, towards the end of the season. I think they were playing more minutes of players that were going to help them not necessarily win down the stretch. So I think they were okay with losing towards the end. Chris Dunn's not out a bunch. Levine was still getting back into form. So I don't think he was the player who will be this fall. And then I think Parker does add a lot. He'll certainly add a lot of enthusiasm to the home game. So I don't have an argument against Mirotic because I did look at that. I know his win share was decent. So I am worried about him. Once he did leave, the team did do worse. But I just think they're not horrible. Like I actually think they're going to win more games than Cleveland, who has a higher over/under. So we'll see. Anyway, that's my I guess kind of a weak defense, but that's all I've got on Mirotic. I don't know how to really. There is no one there that really replaces him. I mean, in terms of his backup is Bobby Portis, who's a completely different player, who I don't think is going to play that much this year. But I think Parker. I'm still a believer in Jabari Parker's talent. So we'll see.
So what do you think they were able to add versus subtract in the offseason?
Well, subtraction. I think they got a more clear focus on who their starting five is. I don't like Justin Holiday's going to play a smaller role. David Nwaba's gone, although I thought he was decent. I like the fact they have Wendell Carter Jr. I don't know how many minutes he's going to play, but I think he will be a positive, although he's a rookie. I still think Robin Lopez is a solid player. But going back, now I'm trying to think what you said, addition versus subtraction. I just think they have a better starting group of players than last year. So with the addition with Parker and Levine the whole season, and then Dunn for the whole season. I'm just like repeating myself. So I'm trying to think how I can say other things. So I apologize.
No,
go ahead.
No need to apologize. I mean, sometimes there's only so many routes that you can explore with a particular team. What do you think about Chris Dunn's evolution, Lauri Markkanen's evolution? Do these guys get better? Do they level off a little bit? Is that something you're factoring into it?
Oh, thanks for that leading question. Yeah, I'm definitely thinking they're getting better.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm clearly arguing with you.
You're clearly just lobbing it right in there. I definitely need the help. So anyway, no, Chris Dunn, I think, can be a starting point guard in this league. So I'm actually more bullish on him than I guess than many people. Markkanen, I was surprised with his rookie year. He's definitely, I think, a very solid NBA player. I don't want to say he'll be an all-star, but I think that potential is there. And then Parker and Levine, I think, are solid NBA players as well. So I think they're all getting better. They're all pretty young. They're on their way up. I know Levine just signed a big contract, so maybe you worry that he doesn't play as hard as if he was working for one, but I do think they're still developing. And I think Hoiberg really hasn't a chance to really showcase his offense with talent that fits his sort of the Steve Kerr. What am I missing? Oh, the space and pay. See if these guys can do it.
So this is something that I am legitimately concerned about on this Bulls side, and I'll force you to fight back a little bit on this one as well. Do you see them turning it over, so to speak, to all the young guys and just saying, you know what, figure this crap out? What really hurt Chicago late last year was eliminating Robin Lopez from the rotation, eliminating Justin Holiday from the rotation, basically pulling anyone with any NBA experience out of the lineup and saying, here, you clowns go figure this thing out. And they couldn't win a game. Or, and on the other side of this is, Zach LaVine, Jabari Parker, they've been in the league for 3-4 years now. Chris Dunn, this will be his third year. So it's not like they're completely fresh-faced youngsters. There is a little bit of playing time under their belt. I guess my question is, do you see Hoiberg allowing the veterans into the mix enough to kind of help this team figure out how to win some tight ball games and get over that hump? Or is it just going to have to be the rookies figuring out on the fly?
Well, I do think Lopez will play a significant role, at least starting off the season. I mean, maybe they did go into tank mode if things go horribly wrong towards the second half of the season. And I think he's still a decent NBA player, even if he doesn't look the part. But you're right. I think these guys, Levine, Dunn, Parker, are going to have significant roles. Markkanen, and Markkanen's the second year. Everyone else is third year or more. So I don't think they're trial by fire anymore. So I think they're a little more experienced.
By the way, I think the listeners should know that I actually do lean in the same direction as Neil. It probably was not particularly well concealed on this podcast, but my hope was that I was able to sort of push us in a particular direction and kind of defend the reasons why the under is intriguing. I think the only other thing I might add, by the way, is you mentioned about tank mode. There is a hope, I think, in NBA circles that teams will tank a little bit less this coming year because of the new rules, because it doesn't benefit quite as much to be one of the worst teams in the league in an Eastern Conference that got a little bit worse. That could kind of go two different ways. Being in a terrible conference means you're going to have to lose harder to really be at the bottom of the pack, but it also means that you'll probably sort of stumble into a couple of wins that maybe you wouldn't have picked up the previous year. So yeah, Neil, I do like your side. I haven't dug into it quite as deeply as you have to this point, but at sort of an initial, the first glance, I think Chicago 27.5 is pretty attainable number, considering how bad they were for all but about 2 weeks of this most recent NBA campaign. What else you got? I'll do a better. I promise I'll do a better job of actually pushing you on the next one.
Okay. You want me to? Okay, I'm gonna stay with an over. I'm gonna go with
you go wherever you want.
Detroit Pistons.
Interesting.
Yes. So last year 39 wins. This year 37.5. So projected to win 1.5 games less. Again, okay. So I think this organization has something to prove. I like their new coach. I like the guy they brought in from Toronto. I like Blake Griffin trying to prove something as well. I think Andre Drummond is getting better. I know it's going to be – I don't expect them to make the playoffs in the East, but I do think 37.5 is just a little bit too low for their talent and their coaching.
So I made excuse me, I picked Detroit actually to stay under last year, and they went over on the very last day of the regular season. So that did obviously leave a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, winning that last game and just barely sneaking over the bar. Do you really feel that Blake Griffin made them better? There are times where I feel like he made them worse.
Fair enough. I feel like it's hard to come in, though, at the end, like in mid-season and sort of really impact the team without playing. I mean, basketball is so much about a team sport in the terms of how you play with each other. So I think it takes more than just a few games to get sort of situated. And I don't think he wanted to be there, frankly. So, and I think maybe now the reality that he is there and he has a coach that knows how to win regular season games. And like you said, the Eastern Conference, I don't think they're going to be at that bottom tanking. So they are going to get a few wins at the end against some of the bottom feeders. I'm a big believer in Drummond. So, and I keep wanting to say the coach's name, but I can't think of it.
Dwayne Casey. Dwayne Casey's the new coach.
Yes, Coach of the Year. Did you know that, Dan?
I did know that. I heard that. I really like, by the way, Neil, the way you threw in really knows how to win regular season games. that was mean.
Well, no, but fair enough.
Yeah,
but I'm just
cold.
saying, I think I like him as a coach, and I think I think he'll do a decent job there. I just can't see them having a losing. Well, I guess they can have a losing record, but I don't see them being like a terrible team.
How many losses do you tack on for Detroit due to health?
As of this podcast, 0. Well, I haven't thought about that, Dan.
Well, that side of the equation. But
sure,
Blake Griffin generally pretty dinged up. Reggie Jackson pretty dinged up. These are guys that are pretty critical cogs to them. Frankly, it's part of why I took the under last year and ended up losing that bet. But do you think they play enough games to get this team over that hump?
Yeah, I wasn't really thinking about injury risk for this team.
No, don't let me convince you. Don't let me change your mind. I'm just
no. You're not changing my mind. I'm just saying I thought about it with other teams that I was a little nervous about. For whatever reason, it didn't seem to bother me. You're not. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Sorry, I don't have a better defense except Blake Griffin called me. He said he's not going to be injured all year.
Oh, good.
So
okay.
Things are just good there.
That's fine. You don't have to be worried about it.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one because I think you make a really good point, by the way, that being in the mix goes a long way towards forcing a team to put their pedal to the metal. I think Detroit does want to make the playoffs. So I think you sort of go down a good avenue with that part of your thesis as well. It's a team that hasn't been in the postseason, really hasn't made any kind of splash in a couple of years. So to me, they fall into that kind of New Orleans Pelicans model of this last season, where it's like, look, we got to do something. Our fan base is getting listless. We got this new arena. Even if we just get trounced by Toronto or whoever right out of the chute, which would be weird for Dwayne Casey, we got to make a splash. We got to do something. So they went out and they splashed, and they got Blake Griffin, and it didn't get them over the hump. But the Cavs fall out. They're not making the playoffs this year, which sort of leaves one seat open for either the Pistons or the Hornets, and that gives them a pretty good opportunity to go out there and try to go get it. So, I think from a narrative perspective, that may carry the most weight in this particular case. My fear with Detroit, and again, this is one of the things that I was picking on you with there, is the health stuff. Blake Griffin's playing 50-some-odd games every year, and Reggie Jackson's playing 50-some-odd games every year. And if those guys are out, that team just doesn't have the firepower to get over the hump. And then if you're 4 or 5 games out of a playoff spot with a couple weeks to go, then it's really mail it in time. So, that number's a tough one. It's close. Like you said, they got to 39 last year, and this number is lower than that. I'm not 100% certain why that would be the case. But yeah, I think you make a lot of really good points in that one. I think this is a pretty close number, and I think I'd probably end up leaning slightly to the over with you as well. All right, team number 3, thesis statement number 3. I think I did better of sounding mean on that last one, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Keep coming
good.
at me.
Okay.
All right, so the next one, I'm going to go. So I'm sticking with the over theme tonight, unless you want me to go under.
You can go wherever you want, my man.
All right, let's go.
I'm just going to yell at you regardless.
Over. I'm staying in the East. I'm going Miami over 41.5.
Miami, intriguing.
They won 44 games last year. So 2.5 games less they're predicted to, or is their total. The only thing that scares me is a healthy Dion Waiters. Other than that, I'm pretty confident what Spoelstra can do to get this team to win, even if they lose Whiteside. I think Olynyk can fill up at the 5. I think they've got enough continuity and enough good defensive players to keep them in games, and I think they're going to be in the playoffs again. So I don't know why this went down. This is the one that kind of the head scratcher. Maybe you can tell me why you think they're lower than last year.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to do the attack you on this one, because this is a really weird number, and it's one that I'm going to spend a lot of time exploring this weekend. Miami is attempting to make some of those necessary addition by subtraction moves, right? Like, they're a good organization that understands the things that they need to fix. They need to move Hassan Whiteside because he's totally hamstrung them on the contract side. They need to move Tyler Johnson, who's making a robust $19 million to be like their 4th shooting guard. So, I don't know how well they pull these moves off, but they realize they've got to thin the herd a tiny bit because they've got these really interesting young pieces. Kelly Olynyk grades out as one of the best passers as a big man in the NBA. Josh Richardson, incredibly skilled. They love Bam Adebayo, young big. Goran Dragic and James Johnson can kind of run a weird Miami offense, although I'm less of a Dragic fan than a lot of folks are. But this is a super, super strange number. You are absolutely right. There's sort of no big reason why this number should be adjusted down that hard, and it makes me a little bit nervous. But, I think this is one of those situations, and last year was kind of the same thing. It was really like a trust in Miami kind of deal, and sure enough, they went over pretty easily. They cleared it by, I think, 2.5 games last season. So I'm with you. It's strange, but I think this might be one of those ones where you just don't really want to overthink it too much. I promise I will come back with more thoughts on Miami going forward. So we're not gonna play the game with that one because it is too weird of a number, and it's strange to think that they could just lose a few games. I mean, honestly, I watched Miami games a lot this year to try to figure out if James Johnson would ever break out of his shell. He never really did, by the way. I felt like they could have played a lot better this season. Like, that could have really easily been a 47-win team, and they weren't. I mean, there were long stretches this year where they just didn't play very good defense, even though that was supposed to be their calling card. They just played slow basketball. So I don't know. That's a strange one. I would lean to the over as well, but I think we do need to explore that a little bit more. So let's just rumble right along to the next one. Maybe we'll do one extra on today's pod, but I didn't want to argue with you on that one because I felt like it was almost too weird. We kind of just needed to highlight how strange it is.
Okay. So then my last over that I have, and this one, probably the least confident about, but only because it's sort of like the obvious pick, and that's Indiana over 47.5. I think they're gonna get. I think every player is getting better on that team, and they added some good pieces in the offseason. So I don't know why their win total is down by half a game, especially with Cleveland now being worse in their division. So that was the one that I first liked, but then the more I think about it, the more I'm worried about it. Do you have thoughts on Indiana?
Indiana. Okay, so this is a team. This is me not arguing with you for a moment. This is a team last year that way exceeded expectations. I mean, legitimately, I do think they take a tiny step backwards. I think they were a team that caught a lot of clubs by surprise this season, and they're no longer the sort of pop-up. Oh, crap, Victor Oladipo is really freaking good. We were not ready for this. And they rolled up a lot of wins before teams started to figure out how they played and kind of the up and down of what they were able to do. They had a decent offseason, but to me, the Pacers really are going to come down to whether or not we think Miles Turner is going to make that next leap. So, with that in mind, I step back into my fake doctorate seat here in the auditorium and say to you, Neil, what do you think of Miles Turner? Can he make a leap?
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, I was disappointed in him last year in terms of a fantasy player, and then he had the injury issue. I was expecting him to be better than he was last year, and I'm still counting on him to be a future star in this league, so I'm hoping he gets better. I know Larry Bird was huge on him when he was there as their GM, and he brought him in. So I am big on Miles Turner in terms of a reality and fantasy player for next season. I also just like the depth they brought in with Tyreek Evans as like a sixth man type player, along with I'm trying to pull up their team roster right now. So sorry.
They got McBuckets.
Oh gosh, sorry, not that guy.
Yeah, I mean Tyreek was.
I'm sorry. My computer's like really slow, and I should have had this up. Anyway,
guys, if you want to advertise on Fantasy NBA today, we promise to use that money to buy Neil a brand new or a brand new 2014 refurbished PC.
This is actually a 2016 brand new. It's got to be all the bad sites they go to. Okay, so anyway, so the other player they brought in was Corey Joseph, right, at the point guard.
Yes, I believe he was there. He was there the previous season, though, wasn't he?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think Domantas Sabonis is going to get better. Okay, so maybe it's just Tyreek Evans that I like, and of course Thad Young is still there. They re-signed him, so I know they really overperformed last year. It was ridiculous. I think they were plus 10 or something in the over/under. I just don't think they're going to be worse than last year. So maybe they do drop a couple games. I just don't think they are going to be like a 42 win team. I think they're going to be 45 plus. So
yeah, I think you're right on that. I think that they come in just below the mark. That's where I sit with this team. I have Indiana at about 46 to 47. So the 47.5, one of my, I wouldn't call it a tenet necessarily of full season wagering, because every team is its own unique beast. Every situation is new, and you have to analyze them sort of independent of one another. But generally when a team gets adjusted up by that much, kind of after the fact, it almost seems like the odds makers are chasing reality a little bit. Like they're trying to say, boy, we undercut this one last year. We split the money, but in order to split the money again this season, people are going to be expecting big things from this Pacers team. They were the upstart. They almost beat the Cavs. 48 wins was really good for them. They were stellar. One could even argue that they maybe should have been in fourth place in the Eastern Conference. They played better than Cleveland for long stretches during the year. But at the same time, I don't know that I see them getting better. That that to me is where things get a little bit kooky. Like to get back to that 48 with not a target necessarily on their backs, because they're not like the Eastern Conference champions, but people are going to be ready for them. Teams are going to take them seriously this year. And I do think there are going to be some adjustment pains to trying to figure out how to work in Tyreek Evans. I think by the end of the season, that'll be a team that'll be as good or better than last year. But I think it's going to take some time to get there. To me, this is one where if there's value in the over, it's pretty narrow. And that's what I'm looking at. It's not necessarily that I think they're going to be a bad team. It's just that when I'm looking for an over or an under bet that I like a lot, or even a reasonable amount, I'm looking for 1 to 2 games at least of space. And for me, I don't really see Indiana getting to 49 or 50 wins this year. To me, that seems like a pretty good jump. But at the same time, maybe they do ratchet it up. If Miles Turner gets better, then this team could make a huge leap, because he was largely a non-factor this season. So there is that kind of coin flip part of this where you kind of have to decide which direction you lean on it. Early look, I would kind of hope that number either moves from 47.5 off in either direction. But right now I'd lean ever so slightly to the under on the Pacers. Neil, give me one under before we wrap up the show. I want to yell at you about an under.
All right, so I'm going to go with the one actually to think about injury risk, and that is the Cleveland Cavaliers. I know they are predicted to lose 19.5 more games at 30.5 is their win total. I think if Kevin Love is out for any part of time, I don't think they come anywhere close to that. Even if Kevin Love is healthy, I think it's going to be a struggle to get there. They've got so many new players that are starting this year. Older players, I don't think they're going to rely on them anymore. I know the only thing that makes me a little bit nervous, I know that Dan Gobert wants to prove to LeBron they can be good without him, but I don't know how he's going to pull that out of his hat. I think this team is going to be in the lottery trying to get the 1 pick again next year. So.
All right, I'm going to yell at you on this one. I'm going to do a good job of fighting with you. I had read somewhere that LeBron James was considered worth about 15 wins. That would put them around 35 this year. Does that concern you in any way?
Well, now that you said it, sure, it concerns me. But how did they come up with 15? I
don't know.
I don't know, but here's the thing. I don't think they take into the fact that LeBron James makes the players around him better. And I don't see who there is going to do that anymore. I don't know who's on their roster that I can say is a good NBA player besides Kevin Love. And if he goes down for some period of time, I just think they go on a colossal losing streak. So
30.5 is a decent number of wins. So you make a good point there. I mean, thinking of some of these bottom feeding teams in the NBA last year, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams in the East didn't get to 30. 4 teams in the West didn't get to 30, but at the same time, there's some really awful teams out there that the Cavaliers are going to play 4 times, such as the Hawks, the Magic. The Bulls are pretty rough. The Nets, the Knicks, not very good. If the Hornets trade Kemba Walker at any point, they'll become quite bad. There's an opportunity here for Cleveland to maybe rack up 15, 16 wins against truly awful teams and then try to steal some against some of the better teams. How does that math work out for you?
Well, I guess the other thing that comes in this factor is that my thoughts on sort of evaluating human behavior. I just have to think the entire city is deflated. The entire organization thinks they're no longer a championship contender after 4 years of going to the finals. I just have to believe that plays into the psyche and sort of the level of effort. I don't want to say the guys don't try, but I just don't think it's going to be the same guys playing at the same level they did last year with LeBron gone. So, and I think the other teams are up and coming. I mean, Chicago is clearly going over 27.5. And then we've got Brooklyn might be decent. New York, I know without Porzingis is going to really struggle, and it may struggle with Porzingis as well. So there are, I mean, the Atlanta Hawks are going to be a train wreck, possibly. So you're right there. There are some wins, but I don't think Cleveland's going to be trying. They're not going to have the heart they did last year, I guess I should say. So
In terms of line adjustment, this will be the last thing I yell at you about, and then we can put a bow on this one where I just had to be a mean old codger for a half an hour. Line adjustment. When superstars leave a team, there tends to be a bit of a betting reaction. So if you were thinking about the under on the Cavaliers, do you think this number is actually going to move down or up as we start to take some money in? Like, do you think the general betting public is going to feel the Cavaliers are just going to lose every game because LeBron is gone? That's something that definitely concerns me when I look at a line like this. Like, perhaps that's already baked into it a little bit. So does that shave off some of your value in any way?
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, people are already concluding that more losses than they should because of the talent differential is what you're saying, because of the loss of a star. Maybe I'm falling into that trap, but I just don't like this roster. I don't think Kevin Love is a guy who wins a lot of games. He puts up great fantasy stats when he's the main guy, but he was never a guy who could lead his team to victory a lot. So we'll see.
Yeah, you're not always entirely wrong, by the way. Again, I want to remind everybody that I'm mostly just yelling at Neil because I promised I would take the opposite side. On this one, it is one that concerns me a little bit. When a superstar leaves a team, I tend to look hard at whatever the opposite direction is than kind of that gut reaction. But it's not always that case, right? Like, we saw a superstar go to the Houston Rockets last year. Chris Paul joined James Harden, and they ended up going over by a lot. Like, sometimes the fit is just perfect, and so it makes sense. We also saw the side that I tend to wager, which is Paul George left the Indiana Pacers. Everybody just assumed they would fall into a sad, depressing tailspin, and they ended up quite good. The pieces they got back ended up being better than expected. So it does come down, in some degree, to what you think of the remaining pieces. And for you, Neil, you look at this Cavaliers roster, you look at Kevin Love, who has been injury prone. You look at some of the older guys like a George Hill, J.R. Smith. You look at some of the younger guys, and they just don't excite you that much, and that's okay. It's not. You don't have to auto bet the side where a superstar leaves. That's generally where I start with a wager like this, but I can at times sort of talk myself out of it as well. So something for everybody to keep in mind. Neil, good groupings of wagers there. I'm officially coming out of my angry professor mode now. Back into jovial mid 30-something. Am I jovial? I don't know. That was fun. I can't wait to break down the rest of these things.
Yeah, I'm super excited to get your opinion on all these. As a guy who used to run a gambling podcast, so happy to learn as much as I can, and thank you for being not too harsh on me. I appreciate it.
No, well, it's tough. I'm not, I've never actually earned a PhD, and I've never stood in on I forget what I'm brain farting on the term for when you actually have to present.
I think it's your dissertation.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So I don't know how brutal it actually is, and frankly, I'm just not that mean of a guy. So it wasn't
that I can attest to.
Yeah, it was tough for me to take on that form. What I needed to do was picture you as like a telecom customer service rep. Then I really could have unleashed the hate. This is going to be a lot of fun. We've now covered, I think, a total of 6 on this podcast out of 30. We're getting a lot of stuff going. I'm going to be typing up an entire list of all 30. I know Aaron Brewski types up basically his top 15 to 20, sometimes all of them. Neil, I don't know if you're writing up some of the stuff that you're working on this stuff, but I think we're going to have a lot of good info bouncing around at Hoop Ball over the next couple of weeks. And hopefully folks can enjoy that. Neil, you and Adrian are back at it tomorrow to finish up the week.
We are. We're going to head back to a division out west, whatever Adrian feels like doing, since, as I heard, he has he has a big birthday coming up. So
I can't believe that. That boggled my mind. Did you know
I was shocked when I heard that as well. No. But it's nice to know that I'm not terribly older than all of you. So that's great.
Yeah, I worked in minor league baseball for so long where it was very much the Matthew McConaughey thing. I kept getting older and everybody else stayed the same age. It was always somebody like fresh out of college, intern, stuff like that. I think at Hoop Ball, we've gone the other direction where Brewski was just like, nah, I want a bunch of old, grumpy men that that can like handle their business and are just like yelling at clouds and stuff like that. We enjoy one another, and that's what's important, and hopefully everybody out there is at least slightly entertained. He is Neil Rochlani. I am Dan Besbris. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Again, come join some of these hoop ball leagues. Neil will get you placed in one of the head-to-head, one of the roto, one of the $50, one of the free ones, whichever direction you want to go. Tweet our way at Dan Besbris, at Ball with Neil, and we'll get you situated. If you have any questions about these season win totals, send them our way. We'd love to talk about this stuff on Twitter literally all damn day. So bring it our direction. Neil, anything you wanted to add before I wrap this thing up?
No. Thanks for letting people know about the hoop ball leagues. Happy to help people get into those situated, and look forward to being back on tomorrow.
Yeah, Neil's saving my hide on these freaking hoop ball leagues. Have a wonderful Thursday, everybody. I will not talk to you tomorrow, but the pod will. Adrian and Neil finishing things up on Friday. I, Dan, will be back with you on Monday. Talk to you soon.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.